Name of person, Maya, Luyan. The name of the girl, the main character in the story. Luke, Tam. The boy's name, Maya's lover, Nina. Non. The name of the woman, Maya's mother, and the ghost in the story, Dean. Bang. The old man's name, who has a close relationship with Maya's mother. Place name, Upper Village. Upper Village. The name of the village where Maya lived. Lower Village. Lower Village. The name of the village where Luke lives and has the ill-fated well. Title focuses on horror and creepy elements, the curse of the well of evil, the ghost of vengeance, the night of terror in the lower village, return of the ghost, blood and tears, the nightmare, the horrifying secret in the ancient well, haunted house. Episode 123, Curse at the Bottom of the Well, a huge horror ghost story. McDuithuan, full 4K, YouTube, https www.youtube.com, watch, VAV7WF, B3TNAQ, transcript. Listen closely, listen keenly, silent beneath the well's depths, murdered, torn apart, eyes gouged out, arms chopped off, body buried at the bottom of the water, the village of Rotten Hollow, rots, stinking to the core. This is the song that children of Upper Village and Lower Village still sing. It is not clear when this song originated or where it originated. Perhaps it was from the time the well at the end of the lower village gave off a strange smell and the water source was contaminated, causing the villagers to become sick all the time, and people kept dying. Maya is a simple, honest country girl living at the beginning of the upper village. She is so poor that she only has a small hut to live in, and all year round she keeps company with a hen and a bunch of vegetables in the backyard. Maya is an orphan, she has no father, and her mother died early. Since she became aware of everything in this life, she realized that she is alone. In the upper village, there was an old man named Dean, over 60 years old, also lonely and had no relatives. In the past, the old man was an acquaintance of Maya's mother. He treated Maya like a daughter, so he often visited her, sometimes giving her a squash, sometimes a bunch of vegetables and fish. Sometimes when he had money, he bought her half a kilo of meat. Maya loved the old man very much, and the old man loved Maya very much. Old man Dean worked as a fortune teller, casting fortunes on the spirit medium. Both eyes were blind, so he looked a bit fierce. His face had many scars. It was said that they were from a robbery when he was young. The villagers often avoided the old man because of his unusually ugly appearance. Moreover, he also worked as a shaman, becoming a bridge between the living and the dead, so people were even more afraid of him. Then one day, Maya also had a lover. That was Luke, a man from the lower village. Old man Dean passed by Maya's house and heard her tell that story. He suddenly sighed and shook his head. "What a cruel fate," the old man scolded. The wrinkles on his eyes seemed to push together, tears flowing along the grooves of the old wound that had healed but was still deep. Maya did not understand why the old man reacted like that, so she innocently asked, "What's wrong, uncle? What did you see?" Old man Dean wiped his tears with a worn-out handkerchief. He waved his hand. "I can't stop your fate. If it's karma, it's hard to avoid. I can only remind you to be very careful. Don't bring disaster upon yourself." Maya vaguely did not understand what the old man meant, but he only said vaguely like that. Besides, right now, Maya's mind was filled with the image of the person she loved. She could not think of anything else. Seeing the love blossoming in the young girl's eyes, old man Dean knew that he could not dissuade her. It was also God's will. If it was disaster, it was hard to escape. Old man Dean rested for a while and then ran home. When he returned, he was holding a package in his hand and gave it to Maya. Opening it, inside was a brand new set of pajamas. The old man looked at Maya with sad eyes, his face showing an indescribable loss. He slowly said, "This set of clothes was left to you by your mother. Just wear it and go see Luke's mother. Everything will be clear later." Hearing her mother mentioned, Maya was absent-minded. She fiddled with the still new shirt. The pajamas were light pink. The fabric was soft, not the ordinary kind. Maya's mind was filled with thoughts. Her eyes were fixed on the shirt. Maya didn't know who her mother was. She didn't even know what her mother looked like. She looked up and asked the old man sadly, "What kind of person was my mother?" The old man looked at the shirt in Maya's hand, sighed softly and shook his head. He replied in a low voice, "Your mother is miserable, but she loves you very much. You must understand that she always wants the best for you." Maya looked at Dean blankly until he said goodbye and slowly disappeared behind the bamboo fence. Luke lived with his old and sick mother in a dilapidated house at the end of Lower Village. His mother had an eye disease. It was not clear what the disease was. It was said that her eyes had no pupils. At first glance, it seemed quite scary because the black of her eyes gradually blended with the white of her eyes. Not only that, her personality was extremely strange. No one in that village wanted to associate with her. However, Luke was a very honest person and was loved by the villagers. That was why Maya fell in love with Luke. And strangely enough, since the day she met Luke, Maya often had dreams. She kept dreaming about the scene of a hard-working woman crawling out of the well, her whole body soaked in water until it rotted, giving off a strong stench. The woman looked at Maya with resentment, crying out in frustration. She opened her black mouth, thick blood flowing through her teeth, down her chin and neck. That dream kept repeating itself, making Maya unable to sleep well at night. One night, the nightmare came again. Maya screamed in fear and woke up, sweat pouring all over her body. She had just crawled out of bed to turn on the lamp when suddenly there was a howling wind outside the window, the sound exactly like the wailing of the woman in her dream that she often saw. Maya suddenly felt extremely scared. She crawled under the blanket. She woke up. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end. The only thing Maya was sure of was that the woman was a ghost, because with that appearance appearing in the middle of the night like this, there was no way she was an ordinary person. Outside the window, the woman's ghost slowly approached Maya with wide eyes. Under the bright moonlight, she could clearly see her white eyes without pupils and her half-rotten face mixed with blood and flesh and maggots crawling all over. That scene made Maya feel sick to the point of wanting to vomit, but her body was stiff. She could do nothing but unconsciously stare at the ghost in front of her. Suddenly, Maya felt something strange. The ghost was wearing a worn-out, old-fashioned ayobaba, the color clearly visible under the moonlight. The style, fabric, and color of that outfit were all similar to the one that Mr. Dean had given Maya. Maya was extremely confused, rubbing her eyes with both hands, afraid that she had seen wrongly. The ghost was still standing there, staring at Maya. Then it opened its black mouth wide, but it took a long time to make a few broken sounds. Maya, Maya, ghost, ghost, unjustly dead. After saying that, the ghost of the woman grabbed the windowsill and climbed into the dilapidated house. She got closer and closer to Maya, making her extremely scared and immediately faint on the spot. Early the next morning, Maya woke up, her whole body drenched in sweat. She suddenly sat up. The horrifying images of last night appeared in her hazy mind, not sure if it was a dream or reality. If it was a dream, why was everything so clear? But if it was reality, what happened? Who was that ghost? What did she want to do? Why did she know her name and say she had died unjustly? No matter how much she thought, Maya still felt confused. There were countless questions, but no answers. If what happened last night was real, there must be some traces in the yard. Thinking so, Maya jumped up and ran out of the house. Looking around the familiar yard in front of her was a neat and clean patch of land that she diligently cleaned every day. There was not a single trace of blood on the windows. Maya tilted her head and thought, thinking that everything was just a dream. A moment later, Luke came to Maya's house to visit and invited her to his house. He also talked to his mother. Maya had been home for a long time. Hearing Luke's suggestion, she was very happy. The terrifying nightmare last night was instantly forgotten by Maya. That afternoon, after lunch, Maya picked out her most beautiful outfit, the light pink bar that her mother had left for her. Maya happily looked at her reflection in the water jar, but then she suddenly remembered the terrifying dream last night. The woman who crawled out of the well was also wearing the same outfit. A terrifying thought suddenly flashed through her mind. Could it be that the ghost of that woman is your mother? At this moment, Luke arrived. He looked at Maya for a while, and then clicked his tongue in admiration. Maya is so beautiful. This is the first time I've seen someone as beautiful as Maya. Even in this outfit, Maya looks so graceful. Maya brushed her hair shyly. Don't tease me. You know, this is the only outfit my mother left me. Luke smiled and gently held Maya's hand. The two of them sat on the rice cart and drove straight to Luke's house, which was near the common well of the entire lower village. When they arrived, seeing the well in the distance, Maya suddenly felt a shiver. Since she was little, Maya had heard the legend of the well, so she had a vague fear and didn't dare to go near it. As soon as the car entered the street, she caught a glimpse of the well, and Maya unconsciously kept her eyes glued to it. A curiosity arose in her heart, making her eyes want to keep looking towards the dark, cold well hidden behind the tall grass. The well seemed to have been abandoned for a long time. Moving a little closer, Maya seemed to see a large rock covering the mouth of the well. On the rock were some worn pieces of paper, not sure what they were. Maya, what are you looking at? Luke suddenly called, making her wake up. She looked at him in confusion, then looked at the well and blurted out, "Have you ever heard the legend about that well?" Luke's eyes suddenly darkened. He held Maya's hand tightly, whispering into her ear, "There are many rumors in that village. It seems to be related to the origin of the rhyme that the children often recite. But it's not my business, so I didn't pay much attention. Maya, don't be too curious. It's not good to hear." Maya nodded slightly, but her eyes still glanced at the well. Luke held Maya's hand and pulled her into the house. Inside the dilapidated house, there was nothing valuable. It was empty. It looked very lonely, and there was also a faint smell of a strong, fishy stench that made Maya feel nauseous. But Luke was still calm, as if nothing had happened. Maya tried to forget it, because this was her first time meeting her family, and it was not good to be curious about other people's affairs. Thinking that, Maya forced a forced smile and followed Luke inside. The daylight, shining through the tiny window, was enough for Maya to see a skinny old lady lying on the bed. Maya looked at the old lady for a while, and then said, "Yes, ma'am, I'm new here." The old lady didn't move. Luke was also surprised, so he pulled a stool for Maya to sit on and smiled. "My mother is sick all the time, so she's not as active as before. Let her sleep, we can sit and chat for a bit, and then she'll wake up." Hearing Maya smile, her eyes unconsciously glanced at the old lady lying on her side, turned to the wall, the blanket covering her neck. Luke and Maya sat chatting about everything in the world. Time seemed to stop in the space where there were only two lovers. Maya didn't know when it had gotten dark outside until she heard the sound of the rain outside the window, and the stench from earlier became increasingly strong. Maya suddenly broke away from the conversation, startled, and exclaimed, "Oh no, it's dark. Let's cook something for your mother to eat. Don't let her starve." Luke smiled softly and replied, "It's okay, Maya. Don't worry. My mother isn't hungry, so let's take it easy. Maya, sit here and listen while I go downstairs to boil some more tea and start the rice cooker." Luke then went to the kitchen. The tiny, dilapidated house was left with only Maya and the old lady, with a strong stench rushing into her nose. Maya felt nauseous. She was strangely scared and nervous. Because of curiosity and also feeling bored, Maya couldn't help but focus her attention on the old lady. She mustered up her courage and said, "Yes, ma'am, I'm Luke's friend. We've been talking for so long that we forgot about dinner time. Are you hungry?" There was no response. The old lady still didn't move. Maya felt even more strange. She boldly walked towards the dilapidated bamboo bed where the old lady was lying. Maya's hand was placed on the patched blanket that was placed crosswise over each other. The stench seemed to be coming from here. She felt extremely confused. Could it be that Luke didn't wash the blanket for the old lady, nor take care of her? Maya took a deep breath and grabbed the corner of the blanket and pulled it down. The scene in front of her made Maya widen her eyes and scream before she backed away. Underneath the blanket was a woman with white hair. Half of her face had rotted to the bone. Maggots were crawling and gnawing at the bloody flesh, then crawling up to the empty eye sockets, a mixture of black and red, leaving only a white eye with no pupils. From the neck down, the flesh was rotten as if it had long since decomposed, surrounded by a swarm of flies, eating it. The stench was so strong that Maya could not bear it. She suddenly remembered the terrifying dream she had the other night. Her legs went weak and her whole body was limp, as if she was about to faint. This figure was too similar to the ghost she had seen in her dream. What was even more terrifying was that Luke's mother was still alive. She moved and leaned over. Her mouth opened, and a few maggots immediately fell out from her throat. Seeing that image, Maya was about to run outside, but at this moment, the door suddenly slammed shut. The wind howled fiercely. The rain poured down. At that moment, Luke came up from the kitchen, his expression extremely calm. He smiled gently at Maya and asked, "Maya, where are you going?" "Oh, Mum is awake. Then wash your face and eat with us." Maya Dean was shocked by Luke's calmness. She stood trembling at the door, but the house was too small. She was only a few steps away from the old lady. The old lady slowly sat up on the bed. The floor and the blanket were full of maggots, blood, and flesh were scattered. Maya felt terribly nauseous. Her stomach churned. She held back and said to Luke, "Luke, your mother is sick. Why don't you take her to the doctor?" Luke lowered his eyes, the bright and happy expression just now replaced with sadness and pain. He told the story. The story was that Luke's mother used to be a healthy person. 3 years ago, for unknown reasons, she started to have itchy rashes all over her body. There were only 2 of them at home. Luke worked hard to support himself and his old mother, all the money he spent on treating her. But the medicine was ineffective. He took her to many herbalists, prescribed many medicines, but nothing worked. Her eyes, which were originally normal, now turned white and cloudy. Her pupils were unclear. The pimples grew more and more, itchy and ulcerated, and in the end, they couldn't be cured. So it became like this. Every day, Luke tried to bathe and clean her, but after a while, the rotten flesh on her body attracted flies, and like that, they multiplied under her rotten flesh, ate human flesh, and grew up, then laid more eggs. There was no way to kill them all. He had no choice but to leave his mother like this, living day by day. Now that he saw that she probably wouldn't be able to hold on much longer, he had the intention of getting married and having children soon so that she could see her grandchildren and leave with satisfaction. Maya heard this and felt both pity and anger. She was angry because he didn't tell her everything from the beginning, but she also understood that if he had told her everything earlier, she probably wouldn't have dared to come here, let alone get married. Now that she had fallen in love with someone, it would be difficult to completely break up. Maya thought to herself that the old lady wouldn't live much longer, so she'd just let it go and wait for her to pass away before deciding what to do next. If she lived together in this house, she wouldn't be able to swallow her food, even if she looked at the old lady's face, and giving birth would only make herself and her children suffer more. Maya didn't say this out loud, but she secretly decided to find an excuse to delay the wedding as long as possible. She knew she was strange, but she was extremely scared and couldn't do anything else. The meal took place in an extremely strange and scary atmosphere. Before eating, Luke used a towel to wipe away the sores on his mother's face. He caught all the maggots that crawled out and roasted them in the fire, but she didn't look much better. The wound on her face was too severe, The maggots had made a nest like a beehive, boring holes into her flesh, each as big as a chopstick, close together. Maya felt nauseous. She was afraid of holes, especially when those holes were made of human flesh. Maya lowered her head and didn't dare to look. Luke scooped up some porridge and gave it to her, spoonful by spoonful. Her tongue was almost rotten. Half of it was gouged out by maggots, making it difficult to swallow. As soon as the porridge entered her mouth, it fell out of the gaping hole on her cheek. The few remaining maggots immediately floated out as if they were tearing apart a delicious piece of prey. Luke was calm, as if he had been used to this for a long time, while Maya could only look away. The stench was so strong that she couldn't eat. But the old lady didn't show any pain, and even if she did, she probably wouldn't have been able to speak. After finishing the meal, it was already dark. But even if it was later, Luke seemed to have guessed what she was thinking. He hesitantly said, "Wait for me a moment. Let me take care of Mom, and then I'll take Maya home." Luke then bowed his head in apology. Perhaps he knew that Maya couldn't eat anything and felt extremely uneasy. Maya sighed and forced a smile. "It's okay. You just do your work. I'll wait for you. If you need any help, just tell me." Maya said a perfunctory sentence and looked away. Luke smiled and nodded slightly, then quickly cleaned up the old lady's bed full of maggots and rotten flesh. At this time, the old lady was still sitting at the dining table on the only reclining chair in the house. Maya didn't dare to look at her, but she knew that the pair of eyeless eyes were looking at her as if they were deliberately examining her. Suddenly, the old lady struggled to say, "The curse, the curse, the curse in the well." Maya looked at her in fear, her eyeless eyes flowing out a stream of water mixed with blood in response to her gaze. Luke heard his mother's voice. He turned to look and then panicked and cried out, "Mom, can you still speak? Tell me again." The old lady didn't look at Luke, but looked out the door in the rain. The old lady still stared. Her skinny, ulcerated hand reached out and pointed towards the well and tried to repeat the sentence, "The curse, the curse." The old lady tried to get out 2 words and stared at Maya. She opened her mouth wide. Thick blood flowed from her mouth down her neck. The remaining eye, that hadn't been eaten by maggots yet, stared at her, making her retreat into the corner of the wall in fear. This scene was exactly like the image of the woman crawling out of the well that often appeared in Maya's nightmares. For a moment, Maya felt as if everything was somehow connected, as if those dreams were some kind of omen. Outside, it was pouring rain. The old woman breathed her last. Her white eyes couldn't close, but were wide open. Her mouth was still wide open, her head tilted to one side, her flesh and blood rotting. Luke cried, kneeling at his mother's feet. He was suffering like many people out there who had lost their mothers. From then on, the world and the living were separated. Maya stood rooted to the spot. Only after a while did she slowly approach and pat Luke's thin back to comfort him. "Auntie is gone, brother. Suppress your grief and let her go peacefully, okay?" Maya spoke softly, but it was unclear whether her words reached the ears of the son who had just lost his mother. A moment later, Luke slowly stood up, looked at Maya sadly, and said, "I know for sure that my mother's condition is not long. A few months ago, a doctor from the province came to treat the villagers. He said that my mother had something strange. Her whole body was like a decomposing corpse. I'm not educated, so I don't know what's wrong with my mother, so I just keep trying to get treatment to get by. She must be waiting for me to get married." Luke burst into tears again and looked at the old woman with a sorrowful gaze. Maya sighed, unconsciously looking out the door. Outside the dilapidated house, the heavy rain and strong wind howled fiercely, as if a storm was about to break out. The wind blew away some clumps of grass and also blew away some crumpled papers with strange shapes on the mouth of the well. Maya and Luke looked outside at the same time. From the bottom of the well, 2 white hands reached out and clung to the edge of the well. The stench from the well rose up with the wind and rushed into the dilapidated house. The smell was exactly like the smell of rotting flesh on Luke's mother's body. Maya unconsciously ran to hug Luke. The two retreated to a corner of the wall, right under the feet of the dead old woman. Luke gasped and whispered, Maya, did you see anything? It seems like there's a ghost." Maya shook her head and nodded. Her hands were soaked with sweat. Her eyes looked in panic at the window, where she could clearly see two pale white hands groping around the well. In a moment, an arm reached out and grabbed the wall of the well. Then the next arm crawled out as well. Maya could see that familiar sleeve. She was scared, but couldn't scream. A figure in tattered clothes and disheveled hair emerged from the dark well. Maya clearly remembered the scene in her nightmare. She blurted out, "Oh my God, it's her! She often appears in my dreams." The two people in the dilapidated house clung to each other tightly. Luke didn't understand what Maya meant, but he didn't have the strength to ask, because the ghost in the well was limping towards the house. After a few steps, its arm suddenly fell to the ground, flesh and blood falling along with it. The ghost opened its mouth in pain. Thick black blood oozed through its teeth and down its chin. Then its legs were severed one by one, making it unable to stand and fall to the ground. The ghost dragged closer and closer, making Maya and Luke's fear multiply many times over. It was clearly the figure of a hard-working woman, her body almost completely rotten. Only a few pale, wrinkled patches of skin remained, like someone who had been soaked in water for a long time. Her arms and legs were severed, and she was crawling with difficulty on the ground, but her eyes still kept staring at the house with utmost hatred. Maya caught a glimpse of the image appearing somewhere in her nightmare. Luke swallowed, trying to calm down, and said to Maya, I remember, when I was little, someone told me about the story of death in the well. There was a woman who unfortunately fell down and died. The villagers were afraid that she would become a ghost, so they covered the mouth of the well with a rock and cast a spell on it to suppress her ghost. Maya nodded. There had always been many rumors in the village. She had also heard many stories about ghosts in the wells in this village, but did not know which was the truth. As expected, as soon as Luke finished speaking, the woman let out a broken scream. It was unclear what she was saying. That shrill scream seemed to carry with it the utmost pain and resentment. Perhaps she did not simply fall down the well and die like Luke said, but there might be another hidden story. The ghost approached the window, not far from Maya and Luke. Luke gasped when he saw the half-rotten face, the flesh and blood covered with maggots, crawling and nibbling at the ghost. It was just like Luke's mother's illness. He unconsciously looked at his mother. He had never felt so scared when looking at his mother like that. Could it be that his mother and this ghost had some kind of connection? The woman's ghost was near the windowsill, staring at the gruesome corpse of the old woman in the house. She opened her mouth and screamed madly. Luke and Maya hugged each other tightly, trying to cling to each other. At that moment, something urged Maya's heart. Feeling the ghost's hatred for Luke and his mother, Luke hugged Maya tightly, staring out the window, fear rising in his heart. But he was afraid that the girl he loved would be hurt more, so he tried to hold Maya tightly, not daring to let go. At that moment, Luke didn't know what he was thinking, but he suddenly pushed Maya away and ran quickly towards the window. His breath was held tight under his stomach. Luke gritted his teeth, pulled the window down and slammed it shut, then pushed the door latch. He gasped, ran to hug Maya, intending to pull her to the back of the house to hide. Okay, here's the corrected text with the timestamps removed. But when the two of them turned around, a chill ran down their spines. The air became humid. The wind carried a few streaks of rain into the house. Thunder and lightning rumbled. The two miserable people could only hold each other's hands tightly, not daring to look back. The sound of knocking on the door resounded throughout the house. The noise grew louder and louder. The fragile door, even though it was bolted, could not withstand the violent pounding from outside. Maya closed her eyes tightly. Her hands were sweating. Her 10 fingers were tightly clasped together, trembling. A moment later, the sound of knocking on the door was gone. The house grew colder and colder. The door creaked, eerie sounds. Luke whispered to Maya, "Don't look back. Close your eyes." Both scared and curious, Maya closed her eyes tightly, but her ears were still straining to listen to the sounds behind her, trying to guess what was happening. Suddenly, the house became strangely quiet. Maya and Luke held hands for a long time before the two dared to relax. Can I open my eyes?" Maya asked, but did not receive a response from Luke. The surrounding was cold as a sheet. Maya was afraid that the hand holding hers was getting colder and colder. Maya stammered, "Luke, why are you so quiet?" Still no response. Maya slowly opened her eyes, trembling. Before Maya's eyes, Luke was standing next to her, his eyes wide open, staring straight ahead. Maya Dean was startled, her hand shaking Luke's arm. "Luke, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you answering me?" The answer to Maya's question was not Luke, but a woman's voice. Maya, Mom died unjustly." Maya jumped in surprise and instinctively opened her eyes wide. She screamed in panic. What caught her eyes was the deformed, rotten face, covered in blood and flesh, of the woman's ghost, crawling up from the well. Maya died on the spot. That face had appeared in her dream. She repeated that incomprehensible sentence. Only then did Luke speak. "Lou, she said she was your mother." Luke's hand was still tightly holding Maya's, his voice trembling with emotion, as if he was afraid of something that was about to happen. The shape of the ghost in front of him reminded him of his mother, and he suddenly suspected something vague. The woman's ghost's eye sockets no longer had pupils, but 2 streams of tears mixed with blood still flowed out. The ghost sobbed and said, "Ghost, ghost, unjustly died. Maya, ghost, I'm sorry. Don't marry Luke." Maya gasped. At that moment, she didn't know where she got the courage to stare at that horrifying face. The ghost's words made Maya and Luke speechless. Could this really be karma, like what old Dean had said? What kind of cruel fate must it be that caused the ghost of the long-dead woman to appear in Maya's dream and then come here to stop the two of them? Why did she call Maya her mother? What the hell was going on? At that moment, the door behind Maya suddenly burst open, followed by old Dean's familiar voice. You stop messing around." Maya was like a drowning person clutching at a straw, immediately turning her head to look at the old man. The ghost of the woman named Nina, screamed angrily, her mouth wide open with 500 teeth. Old Dean hobbled towards Maya, holding her shoulder tightly. In his hand was a wooden bracelet with a few Sanskrit words engraved on it. "Maya, don't be afraid. She is your real ghost." She looked at the old man with tears in her eyes. Even though she was 80% sure, she still couldn't accept this cruel truth. The woman looked at her, her mouth wide open, as if she wanted to say something, but was speechless. She looked at Mr. Dean and then at her ghost. 2 lines of tears ran down Maya's cheeks as she cried. She had never known who her parents were, and had gotten used to being alone and desolate. In her fragile memories, she had no memory of how she grew up, what her childhood was like. But today, in this extremely ironic and terrifying situation, she suddenly had a mother, and her mother was a ghost who died tragically. Looking at the terrifying appearance of Mrs. Nina's ghost, Maya felt a pain in her chest for some reason, and tears kept flowing. What terrible things had she gone through? Maya did not dare to imagine any further. Mr. Dean patted the back of Maya's hand to comfort Luke about her complicated situation. He slowly said, "Your mother's name is Nina. She used to be one of the most beautiful people in Lower Village. She and I have admired each other for a long time. I originally planned to go to the district to do business and earn money to marry your mother. The clothes you are wearing today were also bought by me for her to wear at the wedding. Who would have thought that, before I could return, She was raped by Luke's father, who got drunk. Then she became pregnant with you, gritted her teeth, and endured the gossip to give birth to you. When Luke found out, despite your mother's complaints, Luke's mother was blindly jealous and ordered someone to gouge out her eyes, cut off her hands and feet, threw her body down that well, and then put a spell on her. When I returned from the district, it was too late. The tragedy had already... Karma and retribution, my child. Maya shook her head and looked up at her mother. She reached out to hug the ghost of the unfortunate woman, but couldn't reach her. Maya loved her mother so much, but what could she do? Suddenly Maya turned her head, glaring at Luke's gruesome corpse, her eyes filled with hatred. Luke bowed his head like a sinner and knelt before Maya, the torment and regret tearing Luke's soul apart. Seeming to see the hatred in Maya's eyes and sympathize with Luke's loss and resentment, Old Man Dean spoke up. Maya, your mother only wanted you to live a peaceful and happy life. She was afraid that you would marry Luke against morality, so she came back to remind you in your dream. Now that Luke's ghost is dead, you should let go. The grudges of the previous life should stop there. Maya looked at Old Man Dean sadly for a while, then said, I want to bring my mother back to worship. Old Man Dean nodded, using his worn-out sleeve to wipe away her tears. It's also God's will. Just now the heavy rain and strong wind blew away the talisman that Luke's mother had placed on the mouth of the well. Early in the morning, we will perform a ceremony to lead your mother's spirit back to Upper Village. Mrs. Nina, you heard that. Now Maya and I will take you back. Don't disturb the innocent Luke, okay? Mrs. Nina's ghost moved its head, as if thinking about something for a while, before gently nodding. Maya looked at her mother, thought for a moment, then softly said, Mum, come back sometimes so I can see you, okay? Old Man Dean opened his eyes wide and looked at Maya. Aren't you afraid, Maya? Maya shook her head and sadly replied, Mum, I love you so much. How can I be afraid, Uncle? It's because I'm unfilial that I can only take care of the incense for you now. Old Man Dean was moved. The wrinkles on his face became even more obvious. He hugged Maya's shoulder and patted her as if he were patting his own daughter. The sky gradually brightened. Maya sat on the ground next to Mr. Dean. Mrs. Nina's soul had long since disappeared. Luke had quietly gone to the back of the house. He cried crazily, scratching the ground as if to vent all the shame, resentment, pain, and sorrow in his heart. Inside the house, the rooster had just crowed. Maya slowly walked out near the well. Mr. Dean helped her prepare the offerings and incense, then performed the ceremony to welcome Mrs. Nina's soul until the hour of 9 to 10 a.m. Mr. Luke returned to the house, his whole body covered in dirt and sand. His fingertips were bleeding. Maya felt pain when she saw it. She held back her tears, held Luke's hand, thought for a moment, and then said to him, Mr. Luke, we are half-siblings. We cannot be husband and wife. I know you are not at fault. We both no longer have parents. Whatever you can let go of it. Luke was tearful and wanted to hug Maya but didn't dare. He nodded slightly, not knowing what else to say. He could only watch Maya leave with Nina's tablet in his hand. He buried his mother in his garden and was absent-minded for months, not knowing when he would be able to accept the truth, nor when he would be able to forget the beautiful and gentle Maya he had once wanted to marry. And that was the end of today's story. Thank you all for listening and following. If you have any comments about this story, please leave them in the comments below. Now, goodbye and see you again.